Coming up, the New York Football Giants have had rookie QB Tommy DeVito under center, but he's not the only one making noise early on in their careers around the NFL. We take a look at the rookie class, where Tommy DeVito ranks, and what it means inside the building when we think about Daniel Jones. It's all coming up next. Yes, my friends. It's OGP, the One Giant Podcast, where I am your host, flying solo, Adam Armbrecht, on a Wednesday. We are going to, of course, be getting into the New Orleans Saints matchup and what that looks like for Big Blue. We'll have episodes on Thursday morning. We'll have episodes on Friday with our official game preview, giving our predictions, myself and Andrew Makowitz. But for a moment, to take a little bit of an extra step back here, and we'll talk about Tommy DeVito, obviously, as he continues his run under center for the Giants down the backstretch of this season. We'll also look around the league as well here, because I just think it's a fascinating. This has been an injury-plagued year from a QB perspective, and it's offered a lot of sample sizes. Now, there's been other players like Tyrod Taylor, who came in and played. That's a backup quarterback. We've seen Zach Wilson return under center for the Jets. That's a backup quarterback. Tim Boyle, right? You look around the league, there's been a lot of veteran guys. Obviously got Joe Flacco out there in Cleveland. So there's also the backups that have come in and played. But purely from a rookie standpoint, where's Tommy DeVito maybe starting to put himself in this hierarchy? And we think about draft stock and pedigree and what does it all mean in the big picture, not just for Tommy DeVito, not just for the Giants, but overall from an NFL perspective. So I thought we'd get a little bit of a deeper dive in on that. And one of the things from a pure Tommy DeVito perspective is this little note. Coming out of that last game here, not only was Tommy DeVito the NFC Player of the Week, hey, feather in your cap, but also first undrafted rookie QB in NFL history with 3 straight wins to start without an interception. And that starts, obviously, not the came in relief there for the one game as well. So 3 straight starts without an interception for Tommy DeVito. First undrafted rookie QB in NFL history with a 100-plus passer rating in 3 straight starts as well. Most rushing yards by an undrafted rookie in a single game, 71 yards this past week against the Packers since 1970. First Giants QB with win 3 straight starts, with 100-plus rating and 0 INTs since Fran Tarkenton back in 1970. Third rookie QB, theme of the year here, 1970, to win 3 straight starts with a 100-plus rating and 0 interceptions, and the first since Dak Prescott. So only one other quarterback since 1970 had done it. It was division rival Dak Prescott as well. So listen, all of this to say, when we've talked about, you can look back at the schedule and who they've played against and whether or not this last game against the Packers really truly represented, a test for Tommy DeVito, where he had to do things with his arm and with his legs to give this team the win. I think at some point it's okay just to take away the evaluation process predicated on, is this a nice story because he's an undrafted rookie quarterback versus has he just played good football? And the reason why I bring that up is because, first and foremost, if you talked about any guy that had been taken in the first round of this draft, maybe even the second round, maybe even the third round, I don't know where the cutoff would be. When a quarterback like that steps onto the field, the expectation level of what they're going to be in their NFL career dictates the way that you talk about what they accomplish on the field, right? So if you insert second round, I'll use Desmond Ridder from last year, a year ago, who was drafted in the third round by the Atlanta Falcons. If he had come in and had this type of game against the Packers in his rookie season, off the bench, behind a veteran, you would have said, oh, well, there you go. A diamond in the rough for the Atlanta Falcons, because the pedigree was close enough. Where could he have gone sooner? Second round, right? What was the QB class in that particular year? Okay, how do we think about him? Tommy DeVito is being labeled as a very nice story, but not one that you associate with necessarily being someone that's going to be in the league 2 years from now. And maybe that could be the case, but I find it fascinating. When we go over, and I backed out anyone underneath 25 pass attempts, there's a couple other rookies that would have gotten into this mix. So we talk about players with a minimum of 25 pass attempts, and let's just go ahead and say it right off the top. CJ Stroud was a revelation this year. He had the injury last week, almost hurt my fantasy production in my ability moving through the playoffs. But he has 20 touchdowns. He has 5 interceptions. He's a top guy. He's your pedigree. He's been the clear number one rookie coming out, as well he should be based on when he was taken. We know that Bryce Young, this is the comparison near the top of the draft there, and he's gone 9 up, 9 down. Now, the Carolina Panthers are a very bad football team, but they have some weapons. Remember, Jonathan Mingo is there. I'm a fan of his, wanted him maybe to be a New York Football Giant. You also have Adam Thielen, the veteran. You have some things, right? But it's a dysfunctional organization right now. They got to figure stuff out. They're firing head coaches left and right. Tommy DeVito, though, from a pure touchdown perspective, he's tied for third with only Will Levis for the Tennessee Titans, who looks like he's maybe coming on here, right? Now, and then interceptions, by the way, 3 interceptions for Tommy DeVito. He's among the fewest. Now, his number of attempts here, 126 out of that QB class. That's going to put him fourth lowest total, uh, just ahead of Dorian Thompson-Robinson, who's come in and out for Cleveland, Jake Browning, who's playing for Cincinnati, and he's going to certainly get himself a sample size before this is all set, as well. You're going to see a lot from him before this year is through. He's only had 102 attempts and just 84 for Anthony Richardson. And that's the most disappointing one here on this list, right? Losing Anthony Richardson after just 4 games and 84 attempts. That's a bummer because the guy has that athletic gene in him, right? He was making those special plays. Now, if we just talk pure backup quarterbacks, Gardner Minshew is doing a heck of a job for the Colts right now. But you would have liked to have seen him just 3 touchdowns, the 1 pick, but never quite got there. So I mentioned not only, Tommy DeVito's had some touchdowns, right? And he's also used his legs as well. Touchdown percentage wise among these rookie QBs. Now, bear in mind that this is a quarterback that doesn't have a huge sample size. He leads this rookie class. 6.3 is his touchdown percentage, ahead of Jake Browning at 4.9. Now, again, CJ Stroud, massive sample size, right? Only he and Bryce Young have over 400 passing attempts. Only he and Bryce Young have more than 225 passing attempts, which is where everybody else, starting with Will Levis, falls in behind. Nevertheless, the sample size has been good, even if the competition level has been bad. The one note that you could make about Tommy DeVito that we'll be watching, I think, with a careful eye if we're evaluating him, is the interception percentage, 2.4 right now. That's behind a guy like Tyson Bagent, who's played for Chicago there, but now he's back to the bench, so you don't expect his numbers to increase here. Obviously, down the stretch of the season, Dorian Thompson-Robinson, likewise, these are guys that maybe get thrust in, just like Tommy DeVito, though, and make them somewhat good comps. And Aiden O'Connell as well for the Raiders. Like, that's kind of the nice one here. When you look across those 3 quarterbacks and then add Tommy DeVito into the mix, because it's not a Bryce Young, it's not a CJ Stroud, even a Will Levis, who's expected to be the future of that franchise as well. These other players, maybe Aiden O'Connell, but for the most part, you're talking about backups, flyer guys that can be serviceable. So when you compare Tommy DeVito to that class of player, well, he has the lowest interception ratio. He has by far the highest touchdown percentage, 1.9 for O'Connell, 0.9 for Robinson, 2.1 for Bagent, who came in and played well, decently well for Chicago, at least from a statistical standpoint. The yards per game is the other thing here. Obviously, all these guys, now only one of them, O'Connell, has thrown for significant 170 yards per game for him, but it was 106.9 for Tommy DeVito right now. Other guys in that same range as well. Thompson Robinson not throwing for any passing yards whatsoever. The completion percentage as well, though. You want to give Bagent a nice nod, 65.7. Guess what? 65.9 for Tommy DeVito, slightly ahead of Aiden O'Connell, 63.8 as well. So these are these guys. He's playing better than those guys. And then from a rating standpoint, 96.5 for Tommy DeVito, in the 70s for Bagent and for O'Connell, 50.6 for Dorian Thompson-Robinson. And then if you want to just throw everybody into this mix, including the CJ Strouds of the world, you're going to find him right there, Tommy DeVito, 3rd overall in this rookie class, 96.5 in his rating. All of this to say, when you are inside of it as a fan base, right? You root for the Giants. Daniel Jones goes down. You're dejected. Tyrod Taylor, 33, 34 years old. Like, what is the real expectation here? Then you get to this undrafted rookie and you think, all right, yeah, whatever. Nice story. And we'll enjoy the ride all the way. But at some point, and listen, Saints are going to maybe skew these numbers violently in the other direction in a hurry, right? But there's something about what Tommy DeVito did in this game against Green Bay that at least opens up this door to say, oh, he can play consistent. He can play error-free football, and he can play winning football to the extent of you're going to need to have this guy throw the ball a decent amount, 20 plus attempts in a game. You're going to need him to be able to roll out. We mentioned the Isaiah Hodgins touchdown catch. That was a perfectly thrown ball, placed right where you want it to be. He said after the game, "This is what you do as a quarterback. This is what you've spent your whole life doing. Constructing game-winning drives, making big plays." I went through a very ugly phase. I said this on the last episode, so I'll correct myself here right now. I said that Saquon Barkley was the one that interrupted Tommy DeVito's touchdown run. Then over on Twitter, someone corrected me, and I said, "Oops, sorry, that's my fault. It was Jalen Hyatt." And then someone else corrected that because it was actually Wan'Dale Robinson. So we finally got down to the bottom of it, and I punt that replay into the sun, and I never looked back at it because I don't know. I turned a 26, and then when someone reminded me about it, I said, "Oh, it was clearly 13." And then when I was reminded again, no, it was actually 17. Who knows, right? The devil is in the details sometimes, and I was not paying attention on that particular one. But these are these next handful of games beyond winning and making the playoffs, and we start to get into that discussion as well on our last episode and the different scenarios that make sense. Maybe we'll get to that here as well. It's just you're going to find out if Tommy DeVito is true backup quality quarterback, right? All he has to do is maintain anything close to these type of numbers. Now, the yards per game, like that's really interesting to watch because at some point, if you can't throw the ball down the field, we mentioned this, right? Is Green Bay just playing a shell defense, keeping everything in front of them? Well, we'll have to wait and see. By some metrics, Tommy DeVito has even thrown, as has Tyrod Taylor, a better deep ball than Daniel Jones. We're going to get into this comparison here in a minute inside of the Giants QB room and understanding all the context that comes with it. And then that's not what we're doing here. Is Tommy DeVito a better quarterback than Daniel Jones? That's not what's being asked right now. What's being asked is, what have we gotten in terms of sample size this year on our quarterbacks? That matters. That's relevant to the Giants. And that is somewhat regardless of whether or not the play has been perfect around them. So this has been a really impressive run. I shouldn't say season. A really impressive run for Tommy DeVito. And the next step for him is just going to be, remember, you're going to get the Saints. That's a quality defense. You're going to get the Eagles, who are going to need that game. So that's going to be a quality opponent. And then you're also going to get the Rams, who are trying to push for the playoffs. And the Eagles, again, TBD on whether or not that last game matters a great deal to them or not, depending on how the playoff situations work themselves out. Will I come in after the Saints are just a murderer's row throwing bodies at Tommy DeVito and he gets beat up and a couple interceptions and just dismiss it as being, well, when the offensive line doesn't play well and when you don't get no. It's all that's kind of the point that I'm making here is we're at a place where we can just go ahead and evaluate Tommy DeVito. We can evaluate him in the spectrum of rookie QBs that have played this year and say that he's doing a pretty damn good job for himself. That's, I think, the most important thing that we can say. Now, the other thing that we can look at here too, if you want to pull this thing inside the Giants locker room, right? And I wonder how fans respond to this because people are talking about, now going back and reflecting on Daniel Jones and saying, well, this is why he was so bad and blah, blah, blah. And then there's the defensive Daniel Jones. Well, the offensive line, you didn't have Andrew Thomas and things look different. And, you didn't have Saquon Barkley for all those games. And all that's true, right? Whether or not Saquon Barkley fumbled the ball, he still broke off some big runs in the fourth quarter of this game that mattered for this team's success. Or Wan'Dale Robinson coming on and emerging more. It really is hard to tell here because I think overall the team has played better. Like overall, the team has played better football, obviously, of late. And you try to get into like some of the minutia here just to see mostly about Daniel Jones, if this was just destined to be a down year for him. Like that's really what I'm more curious about. I'm not curious about, if Tommy DeVito had started this year, in a world where Daniel Jones didn't exist and an undrafted rookie because Tyrod Taylor went down with injury was thrust into things. We saw when Tommy DeVito first stepped onto the field. They didn't even let him throw the ball. So what has happened from that game to this game, right? What has happened over a month of a season where Tommy DeVito suddenly looks like a quarterback? Most of that can maybe be given to Brian Dable, can be given to Mike Kafka, right? We've manufactured success out of an average, probably destined to be backup journeyman quarterback in Tommy DeVito. Okay. Daniel Jones' average time to throw was 2.73. As it stands right now, Tommy DeVito has 2.91. So more time to throw, obviously. We've also reminded that, time to throw is not just based on when the pressure gets there, but it's from snap to release as well, right? So holding onto the ball too long or not. Now, these numbers I think are telling in the fact that when you hold the ball for 2.73 seconds early in the year, you're more likely to get sacked than when you're holding the ball for 2.91 seconds now. You may be more likely to be able to extend that play and get that ball out of your hand and find a receiver. So there's a reality there for that. Here's the other thing that I think just again maybe starts to bring this stuff a little bit back just to neutral evaluations of quarterbacks. When you go look at, we talk about average completed air yards. The New York Football Giants, Daniel Jones 4.1. Doesn't take you long to get down the list here, although it is quite a bit higher, I believe, for Tommy DeVito. He's going to be clocking in here when we get down to it at 5.5 yards, right? So, I mean, not lighting the world on fire. And again, the time and how long you have to throw all plays a factor inside of it. Now, intended air yards and then that differential, right? That's a big number here too. So we'll skip over the intended because here's a little bit of a painful reality. The differential on intended air yards versus accomplished air yards. Daniel Jones is minus 2.6. And you go down the list here to find yourself on Tommy DeVito at minus 1.6. Again, that's about route development, right? What are you able to wait for your players to get to? Yes, it's better for Tommy DeVito than for Daniel Jones, but they're both in the negative. So you're not playing ahead of the sticks is really the point here. And if we put this into a positive, if we try to put this into a positive nature for this, everybody, by the way, though, so to contextualize it, why is minus 1.6 actually a pretty solid number? The league's best is Brock Purdy at minus 1.1, Kirk Cousins minus 1.2, Jared Goff minus 1.2, minus 1.5, Jimmy Garoppolo, Tua minus 1.5. So what is the play designed for versus what is the accomplished? Everyone's living in the negative because sometimes routes have to get broken off quicker, because sometimes you run it shallower than expected, because sometimes it's more important to get the ball into the player's hands than it is to necessarily worry about letting that route develop fully. So there's an interesting nature to that, because even though Tommy DeVito is in the negative, he's closer to the top than the bottom. Again, give me another 3-4 weeks. It's probably going to, based on the teams they play against, the Saints, the Rams, the Eagles twice, you're going to understand that number is going to probably get worse, right? All these numbers are probably going to get worse for Tommy DeVito and for the Giants overall. The other couple of things that I looked at, just in terms of, this is really, I'm not, this isn't a Daniel Jones versus Tommy DeVito. This is like the Giants QB room and what has it looked like overall. First of all, I mean, you can go to rating if you want, right? Daniel Jones among the qualified quarterbacks has the worst rating. I mean, the worst, 70.5. He's behind Bryce Young at 70.9. He's behind Badgen at 71.4. Talked about him in terms of the rookie QB class. Ryan Tannehill, 71.9. Leves now starts there. Aiden O'Connell, 74.8, right? Thrust into a starter role. Mac Jones, bad year for him, 77 so far this season. Jimmy Garoppolo, 78.1. Again, injuries, in and out of the lineup. Zach Wilson, in and out of the lineup. Benched, unbenched, rebenched, debenched, 78.2. We understand that there are circumstances that dictate into the production or the ability to be productive for players. But you're not going to tell me that inside of this QB room, and this is at least a little bit of a momentary comparison, Tommy DeVito's a 96.5. Where is this number in 4 weeks? That's what matters most here. And if we're willing to say, and this would be very positive, that the Giants, between injuries and performance and getting we mentioned Phillips coming back instead of Evan Neal, who's injured, and that helps, and getting Justin Pugh on the offensive line. And then even, again, on the offensive side, Jalen Hyde, hasn't always been the most critical piece week over week. We mentioned Wan'Dale Robinson, certainly. We mentioned just Saquon Barkley being healthy and available, certainly. Defensively, traded away Leonard Williams, but that defense has 12 turnovers in the last 3 games, right? Those moments alone create better game scripts. And do the better game scripts dictate the ability to be a little bit more productive from that QB position? 100%. The other part of this is going to be completion percentage among these qualified candidates, right? Brock Purdy leads the league. 2 is right there. Kirk Cousins, Dak Prescott, Daniel Jones is right there. So the big question here is like, is his and Tommy DeVito's completion percentage? Because Tommy DeVito, I think, is living around 65% somewhere. So you got to go down a little ways to get to Tommy DeVito at 65.9, almost 66%. He's basically mid-table in that regard. Is Daniel Jones 67.5 a product, just like Tommy DeVito's, of taking what's there, right? Drop that ball off, let the receivers be productive after the catch. That's probably, yes, what it is. The discrepancy here for Giants QBs overall is, can you, when you have the time, make those passes intermediate, make those passes down the field a little bit more? The other part of it here, just the highlight, Daniel Jones 65.7 completion percentage. Expected completion percentage is 67. Notably, when you get to the top here, right? And we'll highlight the biggest differential in the expected versus the actual. So a guy like Jalen Hurts, people, you bust the chops. Well, he's completing 4.9, almost 5% over the expected completion percentage. So whatever your judgment of Jalen Hurts is, he's actually outdoing what expectations tell you, as was a guy like Kirk Cousins before the injury, as is Dak Prescott. You're still 3 above expected with Brock Purdy. Josh Allen, another guy that gets a little bit of grief. He throws some ugly interceptions at times. He's still a positive 2.5. All the guys that we're listing here, like Geno Smith, like Tua, Derek Carr actually gets in there. Russell Wilson gets in on the positive. So all these guys are there in the list, and you kind of understand Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow before his injury. Hey, we're listing mostly the quarterbacks that are really good and have been productive this year. As you start to get down into the more negative table on this, it's where you have to ask the question. By the way, Mac Jones is narrowly just minus 0.6. But as you really get into the nitty gritty of it, here you go. Tommy DeVito, 65.9 completion percentage, expected 69.7. He is the second worst, only ahead of Kyler Murray, minus 3.8. And this is the little breadcrumb here, right? We're enjoying the story. It's been productive. We're looking at things with Daniel Jones, and we're just saying, man, what was this team to start the year, and what is it now? Are they significantly better? Will the higher competition to close out the season really have everything regress back to the mean? Well, a number like that matters, because that means you are missing, right? You're missing some of those easy throws, those easy opportunities. And when you keep things underneath, when you play the out routes, it's always going to put you in a spot to make things look a little glossier. We get through 8 touchdowns, 3 interceptions. We get through the completion percentage. We get through, time to throw, expected yardage, where right, all these things start to look good, 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 good. And then you get to this one and you dial it back a little bit, because you remind yourself that he is a young quarterback, that he is still working through his process of just developing. There's a reason why he goes undrafted. And when you look at some of those other quarterbacks, you realize that, hey, there are guys among this list. I want to go ahead and say, like a guy like Bryce Young, by the way, he's minus 2.2. Expected is almost 61. He's hitting just 58% of it. So you think about, I'm just thinking other rookies that have played throughout the course of this season. At the top there, when we mentioned Purdy's and the Allens and the Smiths, well, these are all experienced guys, right? Howell, he's still a young quarterback. He's 2.2 over expected completion percentage. And I'm trying to find really the next rookie quarterback that ends up getting listed. Guess what? It's CJ Stroud. And he is just barely in the positive. No, I'm sorry. Yeah, just barely in the positive. 62.4 completion percentage, 62.1 expected. So he's narrowly in the positive, and that's the first rookie that you mentioned there. There are no other rookies that have come in and played this season. Badgett for Chicago when he stepped in, minus 1.9, right? Mentioned Bryce Young already. Mentioned Aiden O'Connell, minus 2.8 on his differential as well, right? So these are all the things that you look at. Incidentally, and we said this, I think, after in our post game, Jordan Love is a minus 3.2. He's only completing 61.5% of his passes, and the expected is 64.7, right? Now, the other big factor inside of this, from just a completion percentage and why it's even a little more damning, maybe for Tommy DeVito specifically, I was thinking about Jordan Love taking deep shots. He didn't have Christian Watson for a while. He has a lot of young receivers. He's trying to stretch the field more. There's a lower percentage on those, right? You're taking bigger risks. So that impacts it as well. And this is probably true of every quarterback that stepped on the field for the Giants. Nothing has been terribly risky, right? They've been risk adverse this entire season from an offensive perspective because they knew they weren't there. And they have a lot of young guys that are still in the developmental phase of their career, whether as rookies or second-year players or coming off injuries, etc. I find it all fascinating. I really do. And I don't think anyone ultimately, I said last episode, I think Tommy DeVito is capable of being the backup quarterback for all the reasons that we're talking about here, right? You go and look at these other stats and you say, well, yeah, why not? Any of these young rookies that came in and played it and, and aren't going to be the starters next year for their respective teams because they have a clear cut number one over top of them. You'd say, yeah, I'm happy to have him there though. Are we comfortable right now in this moment to say, take away the price point, take away the age of Tyrod Taylor, to say going into next offseason, give me Tommy DeVito as the backup in camp. Maybe you bring in another body, obviously. And this isn't about top draft pick and getting future franchise QB. You say, yeah, of course. Why not? Right? You'd feel comfortable doing that. That's an achievement, not only for an undrafted rookie, but an achievement for Brian Daboll and for this coaching staff. But I just find it fascinating. We talk about tankathon. We talk about draft orders. We talk about who are going to be those high QBs that get taken. I said this. Do you have a better chance to be able to make the decision to take a quarterback if you want when you're in the top of the draft? Of course you do. Because that's what the terms dictate here. There are quarterbacks that are listed going in the top 15, top 12, top 10 that by overall rankings for players coming out are closer to 50. But the discrepancy between mid 40s to 50s versus top 15 and first round draft capital for a QB, you can't afford to do that, right? Because if you're not taking the guy in the top 10 or the top 15, and this is getting away from the elite of the elites, the guys that are going to go 1, 2, 3, when Caleb Williams, etc., when you get into those guys, they're not going to necessarily be there at their true model, right? There's not a lot of discrepancy between other positions, where you say, okay, this guy, his rank, his draft stock is somewhere between 25 and 40. Okay. Maybe he goes 22, right? Maybe he ends up going in the 30s. Maybe some teams, the run at positions go a little bit different and he falls back towards that 40 mark, etc. But at 15 positional range in the draft is probably pretty accurate based on scouting and where they're placed. It's just not true typically for quarterbacks. It's never true. You need them. You got to get them. You got to take your shot. And by the numbers and by the percentages, it is not always as critical so much about taking a quarterback early as it is just about taking the right quarterback. And if you look at Tommy DeVito as the baseline model to say he's an undrafted rookie, he's going to be a career backup kind of quarterback. That's what we think he's going to be. But where can the Giants find a steal at that position? Especially if they win a couple more games here, right? Especially if they end up being closer to 15 than they do to 5 in the draft. Do you want them to package everything up and drive up the board to go get QBX? Maybe you do. If you believe in one of those guys, okay. Going to cost you. Future first round draft picks going to cost you multiple picks of something, right? Do you want to go make that choice? And by the way, also compound a little bit of the issue here, at least in the short term, for one more year, because you have big money on the books for Daniel Jones, and then you'll at least have some more money because these rookie quarterbacks still get a nice baseline salary. Or is there a guy that perceptually is looked at? I'm not even talking about second. I'm talking about mid-round first. The Giants are picking 13. Is there a QB that's going to be there that Brian Daboll looks at and says, oh yeah, all the developmental traits? I see a guy that, just like I saw in Josh Allen when we took him in Buffalo, that I can build up and turn into player X, right? That to me is really what I look at when I watch Tommy DeVito. I think about the coaching staff, I think about the development, and I think about the ability for this regime under Brian Daboll specifically to say, yeah, give me a guy with a quality baseline of skill sets and I will maximize him. You cannot do it like the Tommy DeVito model and say, give me a 5th round pick. And rather than him being a guy, a practice squad player, I'll make him a guy that can be serviceable and come in when needed as a backup. I need the player that is perceived to be a fringe starter, a guy that can be a starter, that can be a 10-plus year starter in the NFL, but isn't going to be a Pro Bowler, but isn't going to lead key statistical categories. And then because I have Brian Daboll and because I believe in the system and his development, I say, oh, I can take this guy from being a possible to being a definite, a quality starter, a top half starter in the league with the ability to push towards top 10, as opposed to the way they're perceived as being a back end first round quarterback that could be a serviceable starter and is always going to live somewhere between 20 and 30 when we rank 20 and 32 when we rank NFL starters, right? That's the difference here. And that's the fun of Tommy DeVito. That to me is my biggest takeaway. That and enjoying a little bit of this. A little bit of that fun, right? Why not? And it's the one thing I'll close out and say at the end of the day that Andy has brought up time and again. Now, we disagree about the idea. I love looking at Tankathon. I love saying, hey, well, they went up, they went down. What does it mean? Where do they go? Andy likes to live in the moment of, hey, let's just enjoy the games and worry about that when it gets there. And it's true, but there's something to be said for knowing who you missed out on, who is so good that you want to go make the move to get him if necessary, or who you're settling into as you win these football games. So when we come back in tomorrow and on Friday, we'll talk about updates around injuries. We'll start to do the preview for the Saints. We'll do our predictions on the Friday show. We'll take a wider scope around the NFL as a whole. The Thursday night game is a slog. I think it's Chargers Raiders. I could be off on that. I'm pretty sure Chargers are playing, and that's a mess. Herbert shut down now for the year. I have to take a look at that on the back end. But we'll do all the reviews and look at everything there. And then as we get into these last few weeks of the season, especially depending on what the result is for the Giants, we're going to keep reminding you, here's the top 20 guys, and they'll be listed as kind of bonus episodes. We may not do them on our standard recording schedule, but they'll be up and out there. Hey, these are the guys that played well this season at a college level. These are players that are being talked about coming out or not, like Marvin Harrison Jr., who may or may not be going to the draft now. And that's as big a factor as anything, right? Guys you're dreaming on, are they even going to come out of college? Right? So we'll take a look at those players in the background as well. But I wanted to take a little extra day here, little bonus conversation, highlighting the things that Tommy DeVito has accomplished as a rookie, highlighting the records that he set. He legitimately is in NFL record books now. And it was only in a lot of those scenarios, second or third time since 1970. It's 50 years. He may be in the record books for another 15, 20, 30 years going forward. And when the next young quarterback steps in and does that, the next rookie that does that, he'll get mentioned with Tommy DeVito. Like, his name is cemented with that. He's alongside Dak Prescott and Fran Tarkenton. Like, how cool is that, right? So we take a moment to have some fun, to highlight it, get a little bit on the weeds on the numbers, and just remind everybody to enjoy the ride down the back half of this season. Hopefully it ends up still being a story that we get to be excited about for at least another week. Until next time, you get over to YouTube, you subscribe to the One Giant Podcast channel, you get us on your podcast feed, wherever you get those needs fulfilled. We're doing our post-game live reactions on YouTube. Every other episode throughout the week, we'll be posting midday, right at noon. Pop the top. Enjoy us during the midday on your lunch break. And of course, over on Twitter at Adam Armbrecht, at AndyMac214, and at One Giant Podcast. Until next time, we're here. As Andrew Makowitz would want, need, and nay, demand you, the people, know. As always, let's go Big Blue.